Regional Council. And we just wanted to once again welcome you to the Pathways to Vision Zero Summit. We are excited to be hosting this summit in an effort to encourage our community to reduce traffic crash fatalities and serious injuries to zero. For this session, we encourage you to turn on your cameras so that our guests can feel like they're interacting with you, but please keep your mics off during the presentation. We invite you to type any questions into the chat throughout the presentation, and I will read them to our presenters. We'll pause between our two speakers to answer questions, and then we'll have a Q&A, on time permitting, at the end for any additional questions. All right, just wanted to take a quick moment to recognize our summit planning partners that are represented here on this slide. We really appreciate their efforts, and thank you to all those organizations that help make this series possible. Before we get into the session, I just wanted to invite area counties and jurisdictions to take lessons learned from the Pathways to Vision Zero Summit and put them into action for your community. Mark will be hosting a two-part workshop with subject matter experts designed to help you bring a policy and initial plan to make streets safer rather for everyone. So make sure to save the date for December the 4th and the 8th. Registration for the workshop will begin very soon. All right, so we are excited for our next session titled Operationalizing Vision Zero, Case Studies from Austin, Texas and Boulder, Colorado. Our speakers today are Dave DK Kemp and Joel Meyer. DK has been putting people on bikes since 1997, following a stint with New Belgian Brewing from 2000 to 2004, and the creator of the Tour de Fat event series. DK served as the bicycle coordinator for the city of Fort Collins and helped move the community from a silver to a platinum level bicycle friendly community. In 2012, DK served as the city of Davis's first active transportation planner. DK returned to Colorado in 2014 to serve as the senior transportation planner for the city of Boulder, where he now specializes in multimodal infrastructure design. Joel is a transportation planner with the Austin Transportation Department's Vision Zero program. Joel works on a number of strategic initiatives within ATD, including the development of Austin's new speed management program, citywide pedestrian crossing enhancements, and crash data analysis. Prior to joining the Vision Zero team, Joel served as ATD's pedestrian coordinator and was the lead author of Austin's Pedestrian Safety Action Plan. So I just want to extend our warm welcome to both of these gentlemen, and to start us off is DK.
All right, thank you so much, Alex.
So it's you, Mr. DK.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I think I might be muted.
Nope, you're good.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone today. And again, my name is Dave Kemp. I go by DK, my initials, and work for the city of Boulder. Before I get started, I just want to say I am from Missouri. It's important for you all to know. I was born in Junction City, Kansas. My dad was in the Army. I was back in '71, but I grew up in St. Louis, and so I've got a lot of fond memories of the Midwest. But yeah, now I'm living out west and working for the city of Boulder, and one of my projects that I work on is Vision Zero. And so today, as far as my presentation goes, I was thinking along the lines of talking about what we're doing from a multimedia perspective and how we broadcast the concept of Vision Zero through our community. So why don't we go ahead and advance to the next slide and we'll get started. Great. So, you know, there is a great resource out there called the Vision Zero Network. And the Vision Zero cities are across the United States. They're steadily growing. This is an older map, so I'm sure there's probably more on there right now, but we are one of 3 cities now in Colorado that are Vision Zero cities. And it's a great organization to be a part of. There's no cost to the city. There's a number of different webinars throughout the years. And we also share a lot of information between communities too about what each other are doing. And so I just encourage folks to take a look at the Vision Zero Network and potentially sign up. Next slide. And so we developed Vision Zero plan. It was first adopted in the city of Boulder in 2014. It was a policy or transportation master plan update. And we didn't really put some grades until 2016 when our community experienced a number of fatalities. We had 7 fatalities in a small city like Boulder. And that really prompted us to say, that can never happen again. Typically, we have 1 or 2 fatalities per year. And so this was very long for our community. And so we got to take this policy here and put some feet to it and make it work for our community. So we came up with these objectives. The first one being eliminate severe injury crashes, reducing other crashes, improving travel comfort. And so this was a lot of conversation around the topic, because the essence of the security of Vision Zero is to eliminate those injury crashes, but we've got 16 different things to people, and that feeling safe is very important to folks. And so, and you know the difference, and safety and all this would be. So let's bring this together under one umbrella, Vision Zero. Before we also wanted to create up with the awareness. Why doing this to here today, and also the community engagement, and that's what we're going to get into. But then also helping folks understand the data and being transparent about what is happening in your community, where are the top crashes occurring, what's happening to, and how are they happening. And that was all really important information we did our crash analysis, helping folks understand where how these things were occurring. Next slide. And just to give you an idea of Boulder here, these are a total number of crashes over the course of 8 years here, and you can see that there's been a uptick of total crashes over time here. 2017 was a bit better, but still we see it tipping upward. And again, one of our objectives is to lower those crashes. The next slide. And then you look at severe crash. Now, fortunately, severe crashes have remained somewhat stable over the course of the year. But the unfortunate thing is they're not going down. And what we're trying to do is to eliminate. And so this was 2017 data, and 2018 and 19 data kind of shows the same thing. We're holding about steady right now, but you can see the differences in the number of fatalities, the little white numbers over the top of each bar here. The yellow bars are total number of severe crashes and over the course of the years. And then again, looking at the last couple of years, fortunately, we haven't had any fatalities. Next slide, please. So again, it's part of really understanding where the problem is, what the problem is, and again, who it's happening to. And so what we found is that our data was represented in these 5 areas. People who are walking, people who are cycling, and of course, those are vulnerable users, right? If they're involved in a crash with a car, then they're most likely to get injured. And so there's not a surprise why those are 2 overrepresented areas. And then left turning vehicles. Those are another a big cause of crashes, particularly when people were crossing on the sidewalk or on a multi-use path and people are making a left through the intersection. And then those that are speeding. And of course, impaired travel. We're seeing that across the US. Driving intoxicated is one of the largest causes of crashes in the US, and as well as distracted driving. Next, please. And so then we started to hone in on really who our target audience is. And now we're going to start talking about how we've molded, shaped our safety education outreach. And what we found was that people who are 18 to 24 years old are most likely to be involved in a crash, whether they're walking, cycling, or driving. And of course, Boulder, it's right smack dab in the middle of Boulder here. And when we look at crash maps, we can see the crashes all around the university. It's probably no surprise. And I bet there's a lot of similarities to other college towns around us too. Okay, next slide. And so understanding Vision Zero too in our approaches, we do take the 4 E's approach. It's somewhat holistic, comprehensive, pretty normalized in terms of transportation planning with a lot of our programmatic outreach. We look at evaluation, well, engineering, education, enforcement, of course, then we have to evaluate all that. And those guys are in that photo there, putting in bike counters here. And so I look at this as sort of like an ecosystem. And if you take one of these E's out, then the whole thing doesn't work right. You got to have all these things working together systematically in order to be effective. And also recognizing that it's not just, municipalities, staff in municipalities, including PD, it is definitely in our purview to make changes to our environment to make it safer. But it also takes the people who are living in the communities to embrace Vision Zero as well. Because what we find is that a lot of times there's not engineering issues necessarily, but it's rather behavior. And so helping people understand the types of behavior that cause crashes is really key to making that change. Next slide. And we'll talk about a couple of programs that we've integrated Vision Zero into. This is our neighborhood speed management program, where we do a lot of traffic mitigation in local neighborhoods. Neighborhoods have the opportunity to sign up, and then we will do some data collection on the streets to see if they qualify. And we look at the speed limits, we look at the number of vehicles, and if they qualify, then they can enter into our NSMP, neighborhood speed management program. But of course, this is all under those auspices of Vision Zero. And so we've integrated the program with that project. Next. Heads Up Boulder. Again, when we talked about cyclists and pedestrians being overrepresented in our data, so a lot of the crashes that we're seeing are happening in intersections. Actually, it's like 75% of those crashes are happening in intersections. And so, we all have a responsibility, both the pedestrians, the cyclists, and also the motor vehicles. And so the Heads Up program was because we're not doing a lot of the on-the-ground outreach right now because of COVID-19, but we are doing a lot of social media when it comes to helping people understand, okay, where the crashes are occurring and what they can do in order to prevent crashes and also prevent themselves from getting hurt. Next slide. And of course, Safe Routes to School. Now, Safe Routes to School has been around for a long, long time, and a really important program to teach your children early about the dynamics of traffic and how to navigate themselves safely around town. And so what we did is then wrap Safe Routes to School under the Vision Zero program as well. Next slide. And now Lighten Up Boulder. This is a bike and pedestrian light distribution project. We purchase these little lights that are really easy to attach to handlebars. They're not really for cyclists to necessarily use on a dark, unlit path because the lights aren't that super bright, but it helps people see them. So it's about being seen. Lighten Up Boulder. We were going to call this program initially Get Lit, but we felt that wasn't appropriate. So we went with Lighten Up Boulder. Little joke there. Next slide. Okay. And again, what makes the whole thing go around, and how are we disseminating the information throughout the community, and how do we co-develop that information, and how do we make sure that we're all talking about and preaching the same thing when it comes to safety? And that's building these alliances within our community, and then using these organizations and their circles, their networks, to help get this information out. And these are a lot of the agencies and organizations that are within the Boulder Valley community. And then again, getting into the communication of together we can make our streets safe. Next slide. Looking at the brand awareness, putting a look to Vision Zero is also really important, so that when they see it enough times, they can begin to recognize it and eventually understand what it's all about. And that is one of the hardest things with this particular program, is getting people to really embrace Vision Zero. It's a very sobering topic. It's not necessarily a fun topic that is a ballyhoo and happy. We're talking about serious things in life, and sometimes it's hard for folks to come to the table and really accept and understand and want to learn ways in which they can be more more safe in the community. So we looked at ways in which we could make Vision Zero stimulating, appealing, and we took all these different types of crashes that were occurring, and then we created some videos around each of these different crashes. There were animations, and I highly recommend going to our website and checking out some of those. Right on the front page is the whole opener to Vision Zero. And it's happened over time here since 2016, when we really put feet to this thing. People do now understand what Vision Zero means. And we get a lot of emails coming in from the community asking about different things and saying, excuse me, under the Vision Zero, would it be possible to? And so they're seeing the brand awareness is taking place. Next slide. And then, of course, our most, for good and for bad, our most powerful form of communication today is social media. And we do a number of things with Facebook, of course, Twitter, and Nextdoor. You have the Nextdoor. That's a really effective way to get information out. Then also there's electronic newsletters and of course, our websites too. Next slide. One of the most effective things we did is we had a gentleman in our community, Craig Towler, who was involved in a crash. He was in his neighborhood, and he was taking some groceries out of his back of his car, and an intoxicated driver hit him from behind and severed both of his legs, essentially. And so after he was able to heal and recover, he wanted to make a difference. So he came to us. He saw Vision Zero in the newspaper, and he said, "I want to share my story." And it's sad, but it's also very inspiring. But it was also extremely effective, and in telling his story. So it's a testimonial, is what this is. It's getting out there and being able to share people's stories, because then it really hits home of about what safety really means. Next slide. And then, of course, like Snapchat, like who the hell ever heard of Snapchat? I mean, I'm almost 50, right? And so I'm thinking of, but fortunately we've got some junior planners on our team too, who use Snapchat all the time, and they're able to, we're able to use their skills to help us understand, how to be effective with this particular social media, because again, that 18 to 24, they're not using Facebook. They may be using Twitter, but they're using, these programs like Snapchat. And so next slide. We created these filters for Snapchat, and then we put a lot of information through these filters, and we got a lot of clicks about through this in order to help folks understand that age group, some of the elements, the dynamics of traffic safety. You can see some of the engagement that we did, and that was over a couple of months here that we saw. Next slide. And then, of course, working closely with the university, coordination with the university is key, and getting them behind. Again, it's part of that Vision Zero community partnership and bringing them in. Sometimes you really got to bring them to the table. I mean, you can't argue with wanting to be safer. And so you have to be respectfully persistent for those agencies that don't want to get on board or can't commit, because there's nothing more paramount than people's lives and safety. And so linking this with their sporting activities was critical, because in one sitting here, we can get 50,000 people who came to a football game. And so we used Vision Zero on their Jumbotron in between halftime and beginning of the game and after the game. And we showed a number of different videos about how to be safe, and it was targeted around drunk driving. Next slide. And again, we made these filters here. And skill buffs is like the term they use in CU football. These filters that people could place their images and whatnot under this, and it was sponsored by Vision Zero. We also had just real quick on that too. We also had Google, who was in town, come to the table and say, we want to get behind Vision Zero. And so what we then did is created this sort of trifecta between the city, Google, and the university. And the Google ended up paying for all the university outreach. And so what started with the football games then went to basketball and then volleyball. And so they were a great sponsor for us here when we had those in-person games. And we'll get back there again. Next slide. Good. And then we also integrated it into our bike share. The city subsidizes currently our Boulder bike share program. And so as a primary sponsor, well, what actually happened is that their primary sponsor bailed on them. And so we had to come to the table to help subsidize the program here. And so by that, we became the title sponsor. And we said, put Vision Zero up there, front and center. Next slide. And then, of course, getting interactive with folks. And this is really good when you have a smaller community. And I guess you don't need to be necessarily a smaller community, but it helps to organize around particular neighborhoods and then bring people out and then do an audit. Go out there and walk with people and help them understand what it's like to be a pedestrian and look for things that are unsafe. Are there sight distance issues at intersections? Are there giant potholes in the roadway that would cause someone to crash if they're riding a bike? Is there a missing stop sign? There's a number of things that you'd find doing these audits, but it's a way to engage people and really get behind them. They become champions of safety, of Vision Zero. And that's what you really want. You want people speaking on behalf of the programs that you're creating. Next slide, I think we're just about. And so, yes, we continue the path forward. One of the things about Vision Zero that you gotta be cautious about is putting a timeline to it. A lot of communities that you're probably seeing is, okay, by 2021, we're going to have accomplished Vision Zero. Frankly, putting a year behind accomplishing the goal of eliminating all crashes is extremely difficult. And by putting a certain deadline on it, and you don't make that deadline, it begins to compromise the integrity of the program to some degree. And so you got to be careful also about adding goals that say, well, we had 100 deaths in 2019. We're going to have 50 deaths in 2020. You can't do that either because zero is the goal here. It's the ideal that we're trying to aspire to. It's not okay to have 50. It's not an appropriate goal. Now, you can measure the downward trend of crashes, and that's a great thing. But until you get zero, are you successful? So it can take years. Just use caution when you put deadlines to your program. Okay, next slide. I think that is the last one. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, for listening. Here's my contact information up here. Feel free to reach out to me. Check out our website. The website's there. A lot of great resources on that. And I'm really, thank you again for bringing us to the table. We're happy to tell our story. It's not easy. There's a lot of, people think, oh, you're Boulder or you're Austin, of course you can do it there. It's not true at all. I mean, we have all the same issues, the concerns, the public engagement topics, and so you can do it. You just got to put your mind to it, put some resources toward it, and bring it to, develop it and bring it to fruition. And you can't stop. Once you develop, you got to keep it going. So thank you kindly again, and look forward to questions after Joel.
All right then. Well, then I guess we'll go ahead and let transition to Joel. But I wanted to say thank you, DK. Really appreciate your really interesting presentation on Boulder. Having been there a couple of times, it's a fantastic place to visit and to walk and to bike. And so, yeah. Okay, so Mr. Joel, I think you're up. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. And you're muted, sir.
All right, there we go. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. While we get these slides set up, yeah, I just wanted to thank Alex and Amanda for setting all this up, and thank you, Mark. I am also from Kansas City area. I'm from the suburbs of Kansas. Went to KU, and I actually interned at the City of Kansas City Planning Department about 10 years ago during the Funkhauser administration. So it's great to be here, and I'm glad to see that KC is kind of taking up Vision Zero. It's really exciting to see. Alex, can you see my slides?
No, sir, I sure can't.
Okay. Let me see.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about.
Although, sorry, I can see your notes, the notes section.
All right, let's swap that.
Okay, we're good.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience in Austin implementing Vision Zero. The title of this session is Operationalizing Vision Zero. That's kind of a term we use a lot, and really something I think is a really important topic. It's how you go from adopting that ambitious policy goal to actually making changes on the ground and importantly, internal change from within. I think that's one of the hardest parts about the work that we do. Before I talk about Austin, I just wanted to give a shout out to the city of New York City, who, if you're interested in this topic of like sort of how the sausage is made, I would encourage you to like look into the work that New York is doing. And there's a fascinating webinar that the Vision Zero Network put together on this topic. New York is really thought of as like a leader in North America on Vision Zero. And obviously the context is very different there from a city like Austin or Boulder or Kansas City, but there's a lot of really great lessons to be learned from there in terms of how to implement change from within. So if you're interested in that, I dropped a link there to that webinar. So the way I'm going to structure this is basically outline 3 lessons that I wanted to get across in terms of how to create change internally. And this has been from just my brief experience working with Vision Zero in Austin for the last 3 to 5 years. We don't have all the answers. We haven't substantially reduced traffic fatalities, although serious injuries are down around 25% this year, which is great. But just wanted to kind of share some of the challenges and opportunities that we've seen here in Austin. So the first kind of lesson I wanted to get across was the idea of integrating Vision Zero or safe systems principles into city policy. So if you're not familiar with the concept of safe systems, it's sort of synonymous with Vision Zero. It's a concept that a lot of European countries use to talk about this idea of shared responsibility, sort of the holistic view of integrating safety into everything we do. So this has been a really important key for Austin. Just to give you some background on how we got to where we are. Vision Zero in Austin was actually an advocate-led initiative at the beginning. So we had a really committed group of pedestrian safety advocates who were sort of familiar with the idea of Vision Zero and wanted to bring it to Austin. They were able to work with a council member who formed a task force in 2015. And that was really the start of our journey to this development of our program, where we brought together agency staff, partners from universities, stakeholders, advocates together through a series of workshops to really develop our action plan. And I think this is really important because it was sort of a bottom-up effort and really got us off to a good start in terms of building support. Shortly thereafter, we started taking the results of those conversations and actually developing policies and kind of inserting those into city policy at the highest level. So Imagine Austin is our city's comprehensive plan. We, in 2016, actually adopted Vision Zero as an official city policy and as an official city goal to get to zero. And I think that's really important because, I think Leah Sham talked about this in her presentation on the opening session. Vision Zero is not just a slogan. It's not just a new program. It's really sort of a paradigm shift. And we thought it was important to get that into our city policy at the highest level so we could have a shared understanding from policy level on down of what our job is as transportation staff. And so following that, we were able to implement a lot of safe systems language into our strategic mobility plan, and then our strategic direction, which is sort of our 3 to 5 year horizon plan for staff. And having that in our city policy has allowed us to do a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second, but here's just some example language when I talk about safe systems. Safety was included as the very first chapter in our strategic mobility plan. The very first policy in that entire plan is prioritize the protection of human life over all else in the planning, design, and operation of Austin's transportation network. That's a pretty bold statement, but we thought it was important to have that in there. So when we go to, when there are trade-offs between things like safety and vehicle throughput, for example, it's very clear what our job is as staff. So things that we've been able to do based off of that, we recently implemented a citywide package of speed limit changes on over 850 miles of streets. And that directly came out of those policy statements that we had in our strategic mobility plan around managing for safe speeds, thinking about speed in a different way, really giving us the policy backing to go out and do some things differently. So this is a new thing that we've done in Austin, and we were lucky to have that policy backing to be able to go do something as big as this. In that bucket of speed management, also being able to think about how we look at setting speed limits more generally on our arterial streets. So having that language in our policy documents allowed us to move from the traditional 85th percentile approach for setting speed limits to more of a expert systems approach that's more in line with Vision Zero. And again, that really came out of those conversations and policy statements that we were able to get into our policies. And so from that, we were able to lower speed limits on a lot of our high injury network. So just this summer, we were able to lower speed limits on 20% of our high injury network. And we're going to continue to bring forth packages of speed limit changes over time. Getting a little more into the weeds about what that's allowed us to do, really trying to incorporate those safe system principles into our design guidance and some of our street design guidelines. So looking at the concept of like target speeds and trying to harmonize the design of our streets with the setting of speed limits. This really came out of some of the work that NACTO has done recently around safe speed limits for city streets. And this was a recent effort that again, our policy language allowed us to have the backing to do. Another idea we are looking into now is the idea of setting maximum desirable distances between crossings. So trying to avoid the situation like you see there on the right, where you have almost a mile between crossings, really integrating that type of standard into all of our design guidance so we don't sort of repeat the mistakes of the past. The second lesson, which I think is very intuitive to a lot of people, but doesn't always get implemented, and I think is really important to Vision Zero especially, is using data to develop tools to build internal and external program support. So I think the idea of using data is something that everyone can get behind, but with Vision Zero especially, I think as an industry, we've sort of been flying blind for a long time. We haven't made the data very accessible and transparent to even our internal staff sometimes. So that's one thing we've been able to do that I think has allowed us to do some interesting things that I'll share here. So I'd be interested to hear from others on what your experience has been working with your crash data, but at least in Austin and in Texas, we have a lot of inconsistencies, using the crash data that comes down from the state level. We have situations like there on the left where we have, a street like North Lamar and South Lamar. Oftentimes the crashes get geocoded on the wrong street. We have situations like here on the right where different police officers are sort of sloppy with how they input the crash data. And it really leads to this inconsistent data that really impacts our ability to do our jobs. So I think really early on, we recognized this was a problem and that we were going to have to address it if we were going to really have confidence in our data. So one of the first things we started doing was building an in-house crash database. We're lucky to have a really talented data and technology team in-house within the transportation department that luckily had some resources and time to help out Vision Zero early on. They developed this sort of crash record management system for us where we could go in, pull down the data from the state level, and then do different things to it at, based on our understanding and based on our needs crash data analysis and things like that at the city. So for example, we can go in, change the GPS coordinates of those crashes if we find that they're inaccurate. We can enrich the data with additional information on speed limits or planned infrastructure projects that we know about. And really this is sort of the backbone of all the work that we've been able to do on data. So, you know, I don't expect every city to be able to have the resources to do something like that right off the bat, but I think there are other, you know, ways to do that through consultants and things like that. So just to share some of the things we've been able to do with that enhanced crash data, we have a business intelligence analyst on our staff that works with different intelligence tools. He's been able to take that data and develop these different dashboards that we've created for staff to use. So this one right here is a dashboard we've developed for our signals engineers. So they came to us and basically told us, you know, they didn't have a lot of information on crash history. You know, if they wanted to understand trends at different intersections, they would have to request that data from us in the past. But now with these new dashboards and tools, we've been able to sort of daylight that data, develop these tools for them to go in and sort of interact with the data. If they're interested in particular locations, they can go and look at the crash history, the time of day, the different crash types that they're interested in, and really use that to make decisions. So this one, for example, there's a few different crash types that our signals engineers were particularly interested in, so we developed this dashboard for them. So just as an example, you can click on different locations throughout the city. It'll sort of dynamically update the crash data there. This one is looking at the opposite direction, one straight, one left turn crash. So these are a lot of crashes where people, you know, have like a permissive left turn where they go across the other vehicle's path. That's a very common crash type we have related to signals. So our engineers have been able to use these tools to identify patterns, identify the top locations, and then go and make actual improvements on the ground. And so doing things like flashing yellow arrows or protected left turns where the data shows that there's a problem. And, you know, we've been able to do this at a few locations, but really the idea here is putting the data into the hands of our staff so they can go out and make these decisions on their own and not have to sort of request that type of information. We've also used these tools to identify locations where we want to do leading pedestrian intervals. So giving pedestrians a head start. We used those tools to identify, you know, where there's a high prevalence of turning crashes involving pedestrians. So that was another success as well. We've developed mapping tools. So especially for our staff who does things like crash diagramming, you know, not having to sort of pull that data down for them, really just giving them access to that through really easily accessible web-based mapping tools like ArcGIS Online. Another recent way we've been able to use that data backbone is our new traffic calming program, where we're actually ranking every residential street citywide based on crash history and some other factors to propose traffic calming treatments. So, you know, without that backbone of crash data, we wouldn't be able to sort of do this type of thing where we've been able to make that data available to the public. We've also developed some external facing dashboards for the public to kind of play around with the data. This is our Vision Zero viewer we recently developed. I have a link to that at the end of the presentation, so feel free to go explore that. But all of these different components you can sort of interactively look at and sort of isolate different modes that you're interested in or different times of the year that you might be interested in. And then we have some sort of key indicators that we want to show people where we are and be more transparent and have that accountability. That viewer also has a mapping component where people can go in and look at historical fatalities and serious injuries and sort of understand the different modes involved. And then the next sort of step that we want to pursue in this viewer concept is building off some of the work that New York has done with their Vision Zero viewer, really integrating projects into the viewer so people can understand, okay, here's the crash data, here's our hotspots, what is the city doing about it? New York's sort of a leader on that and making, all these incredible street transformations that they're doing accessible to the public. So I think that's really important as well. Last lesson I want to get across, also pretty intuitive, but I think has been important to some of our success in building the program, is meeting regularly with internal and external stakeholders. So, I think the idea here is that, to get Vision Zero, to get people on board and to make it, to have the reach that it really needs to have, it can't just be internal city staff kind of laying out the program. We need to get buy-in from different city departments, different divisions within our own department, and then also our advocates, our universities. This is really a shared responsibility. It's really not just one person's responsibility. So being able to meet with people regularly and continue that momentum is super important. And the way we've done that is through a couple different ways. We've established what we've called our Vision Zero Leadership Council. We actually have a meeting with this group tomorrow. We meet every 6 weeks. This is a group made up of our, people at sort of the highest levels of our police department, our fire department, other city departments, people from our public health, and even our transit agencies and our state DOT are on board. So typically at these meetings, we start with a review of the last month's crash data to really understand the trends, to ask questions and really ask our partners what they're seeing on the ground. We have a lot of different initiatives that impact these agencies as well, like our speed limit changes. We need to make sure that from a law enforcement perspective, they understand what's coming down the pipe. From emergency response perspective, they need to understand how that might impact emergency response times, things like that. So it's really a way to have a communication pipeline and be really open about the work that we're doing. And this has been really key to our ability to sort of get Vision Zero at the top of the minds of other agencies. Just to give you an example of the type of thing we're talking about and how this can be beneficial. Recently at one of our meetings, one of our partners brought up this idea that wasn't even really on our radar, the idea of a safety city. So if you're not familiar, these are essentially facilities where kids can go do hands-on training for safety education. A lot of different cities have been doing these, including Lubbock in Texas. So this was, again, something that we didn't really, weren't thinking about, but just by having those conversations, this was sort of unearthed, and now it's an idea that our partners are really excited about, and we've been able to have some more conversations from that group. So the other way we've been having those sort of regular communications are through what we're calling our Vision Zero Alliance, and this is really our external facing group. So advocates. We have a really strong and emerging safety advocacy group, Central Texas Families for Safe Streets. We have a group called Vision Zero ATX. And of course, we have our pedestrian and bicycle advisory councils and things like that. So this is a group that we bring together quarterly, where we share updates on the work we've been doing. We try to sync up on different events that are coming up. So this is a Vision Zero vigil that one of our advocacy groups puts on every year. So, it's obviously a tightrope sometimes balancing. We can't share everything we're doing internally, but we want to be as transparent as possible. And, the advocacy part of Vision Zero is incredibly important, right? I talked about how Austin's experience forming Vision Zero was really a bottom-up approach. I think this has been this, other cities experience as well, that having that advocacy support, having accountability, and being able to make that case in the community of why this is important is incredibly important to the continued success of the work we're trying to do. And then finally, we have a monthly fatality review board who meets to talk about all of the previous month's fatalities. So we start with looking at just basic information, where the crash occurred. Then we get into the crash narrative about that the police officer writes. And then again, we use that data, that backbone of enhanced data that we now have to be able to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing at those locations. And then we make recommendations on what could have been done differently there. So, a lot of times it's a drunk driver, a speeding person that we couldn't have done anything about, but from an engineering perspective, but a lot of times there are things we can do. And so we try to be responsive to those. So it could be something as simple as, trimming back a tree and putting up a sign. This is an area where we had a red light runner. After our engineers went out there, it was a little difficult to see that signal. So we wanted to be responsive and go do something about that, even though we couldn't prove that that's exactly what happened. Or even things that are a little more complex, like this is an area where we had a pedestrian fatality and just a lot of pedestrian activity in general. We thought it might be related to our bus stop placement. So we use this opportunity to consolidate some bus stops around a safe crossing location to try to reduce that tendency for people to cross in risky areas. And then maybe more difficult things to do, like closing median access in areas where we have a history of crashes. So, you can use things like delineator posts. It doesn't have to be a full concrete barrier, but really trying to get out there as soon as possible after the fatal crash happens. This isn't something we can do on our own. Our fatality review board is really integral to bring those partners together. It's our engineers, it's our planners, it's our detectives who have some more information that we don't always have about what happened with that crash. So I would definitely recommend, if you're thinking about doing, building Vision Zero internally, doing things like this where you're able to meet on a pretty regular basis. So to recap, integrate safe systems into city policy, use data, develop tools, and then meet regularly with internal and external stakeholders. So that's just our experience here in Austin. Like I said, we don't have all the answers, but it's really great to be able to share this type of information because we all have a lot of the same challenges. So I'm excited to get into the questions. Here's some links to some of the work we've been doing, and then that webinar from New York City. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Joel. We really appreciate you coming and speaking today. And just a note for attendees, we're recording the session, and also we'll be making these PowerPoints available for all the attendees. So if there's anything you want to dig into, feel free to. And then of course our speakers will, I'm sure, be happy to receive additional questions if they occur to you after the point. So let's jump right into the questions. The first question I have for you guys is, and I don't know if it's necessarily for one or the other, so you may both want to chime in, is having good FARS recording for patrol makes a huge difference in crash data. Does your internal crash management system have automated processes for clean data? Actually, this may be more for Joel.
Yeah, so the way it works, and I assume it's similar in other jurisdictions, but our crash records originate from local law enforcement. They go up through reporting system to Texas Department of Transportation, who geocodes the data, cleans it for us, and then we're able to pull that in for our record management. The state of Texas is a very big state. They have a lot of data to work with. So we have, our experience has been, there's been a lot of inconsistencies, especially with that geocoding of the locations. We found that up to like 15% of the crashes just weren't geocoded at all. So they didn't have a location, which impacts our ability to do our job. So through that tool we've built in some QA, QC aspects of it where we're able to go in, verify the location, and then move it to where we think the crash happened. So, and then, there's all kinds of other inconsistencies. Things like in the crash narrative, it'll say that speeding was involved, but then in the contributing factors section, nothing will be listed. So, if we go to use that field, then we're not really capturing the full extent of that crash. So, we're kind of continuing to think of ways to improve the accuracy of that data and also enrich it with other information that doesn't originate from the crash report. So things like speed limits and other on the ground infrastructure. So it's definitely a challenge, but it's super important to get right.
So I would echo some of that, and I think that reviewing crash data is probably one of the more laborious parts of our jobs, and looking at how these crashes took place, because sometimes the report alone doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. But when you dig into some of those narratives too, witness accounts and whatnot, you begin to start to put together the pieces. And so a program that we use is called Crash Magic, and that really helps us with I guess cataloging and understanding where and how the crashes are occurring. And but it is a chore, but it's so important to really understand, I think, how and why these crashes are occurring.
Wonderful, thank you. This one says either or, but I think you both probably would want to jump in on this one. If your city is a part of the movement to reduce the role of enforcement in Vision Zero and or the role of policing in transportation, how are you operationalizing that change?
I can kick this one off, Joel.
Okay.
So this is a tough one. We definitely want enforcement as part of Vision Zero. I think it's critical, but it's important that we really be strategic with where we use enforcement. And so, PD will get a lot of calls in neighborhoods. I think someone's speeding down my street. Someone needs to mute. If you're able to mute your microphone, that would be great. Thank you. All right, great. And so anyway, PD will sometimes get called to areas of town that really don't have, experience a lot of crashes. And so what we do is we get strategic with PD and place them in locations along arterial roadways where we're trying to, what they're doing is trying to catch speeders. Essentially, they're really focused on speed related problems associated with Vision Zero. Thank you. But to say that we're trying to get away from enforcement, it's not something that we are trying to do. But understanding what some of the equity issues associated with enforcement there are. But I mean, talk about transparency, and I think battling those or facing those perspectives, I think, is really important up front with our PD, so people do feel comfortable with our enforcement measures.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of at the forefront of minds of the Vision Zero community, as it is with a lot of other city initiatives nationally. But at least in Austin, I don't know that we're necessarily trying to decrease the role of enforcement. I mean, I'd say that a lot of people in Austin, want more enforcement in certain respects. I think what we're trying to do is sort of get a hold of how we get behavior change, regardless of what tools we use, right? What's most effective? Is it enforcement? Is it education? Is it street design? All of those things have to work together. I think there's a lot of policy conversations happening around enforcement that we want to be a part of. And so it's really a larger community conversation about the role of enforcement in all aspects of the work we do. I think there's a growing movement within traffic safety, at least, that automated enforcement is going to be really key, right? Like New York City has and others have done a lot with automated speed enforcement, automated red light running cameras, things like that. Unfortunately, in Texas, our state legislature doesn't allow cities to do things like that. So our hands are very tied by trying new things like that we're going to hopefully advocate for, and I think our advocates are very, very interested in doing as well. So all that to say, I think there's a larger conversation to be had, but I don't think it's necessarily decreasing the role of enforcement. It's just thinking about how we can be smarter about it, and how we can have those things work together.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. What advice can you give to those who don't have the budget to create their own data dashboards or crash record management?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully that that data is at least accessible, you know, to smaller agencies from the state level or wherever it comes from. You know, there are tools out there. If you can't do it in house, there's private companies out there that do this type of work. But yeah, I think to whatever degree you can, try to use that crash data to at least start somewhere, right? Like hopefully there's at least some staff that have some familiarity with GIS and can help potentially develop some crash hotspots maps to start the conversation. I don't think it's overnight cities are going to get to where they want to be, but I think just starting somewhere. I think the idea of a high injury network is really a sort of blunt but effective tool to start to identify longer corridors that are some of your crash hotspots. But yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge for smaller agencies to try to get to that holistic view of where you want to be.
And I would say also start building the momentum of why it's important and the tools that you need in order to do the job that we need to do to understand how crashes are occurring. And so it may not, if the discussion is not being had yet within, and I am just assuming that this is coming from a smaller community, then begin to introduce and have those discussions so that more funds can be budgeted to Vision Zero if possible. And then look to your regional council of governments. Do they have resources that can assist with those things? Bring in all the guns to help you with understanding how you can be effective at understanding crashes. Sometimes we think of ourselves in this silo, we don't have it within our department. And then you can look at other departments too, and work closely with PD on this. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate those answers. We're nearly out of time, so I think we've got time for one more. This one is for Joel, although DK might be able to give his own opinion as well. What's the approximate time between the formation of the Vision Zero task force and the adoption by the city of Austin? So a follow-up would be, did your department start with a plan for data sharing, tool development, and a leadership council, or was that learned along the way? So maybe kind of, that maybe some of the time frames and stuff involved.
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I said, the sort of momentum for building Vision Zero in Austin started around 2014, where a small group of advocates kind of recognized what was happening around other cities. And so the first action was council recommending that we form this task force. I think they met for about a year to formulate recommendations and an action plan, and then officially adopted that in around 2015 or 2016, I want to say. I will say the first couple of years of our experience with Vision Zero was kind of stagnant. We had essentially one staff person working on this. And we weren't really getting anywhere. We had this large action plan with like 60 recommendations, and that's just way too much for one person to take on. About a year and a half ago, our director, sort of made the case that we needed more staff, we needed more funding. And so we now have 4 people working full-time on Vision Zero. The leadership of my boss, Louis Leff, was brought in as sort of a seasoned administrator within the city. And he sort of made the case right off the bat that we need to get our data in order. So he made that one of the top priorities. And luckily, like I said, we're able to have some staff who had some time to be able to develop that. So it was definitely a learning process and in terms of making the case for more resources. So I think that's important.
Anything to add there, DK, in terms of timelines and stuff for Vision Zero and Boulder?
I think Joel made some good points. I would just say that it's not an overnight success. It really, work on the things that you can. If you haven't started a program yet, begin putting together the foundation of what a program might look like and the things that you want to achieve. Put a pathway together, if you will, on how you can get what you need from Vision Zero and the steps that you need to take it. So develop the plan around it. And you'll get.
Well, thank you both tremendously, DK and Boulder, and Joel and Austin. I really appreciate you taking the time today to come and talk to us about what's going on in your various and respective communities. That was tremendously insightful. We'll make sure to share those. We recorded this session, and we'll also make sure to have those PowerPoints shared. And kind of to bring up what DK mentioned before, our next session, the impacts of traffic crashes, personal stories from survivors, may be of particular interest to some of you as well. So we'll look forward to seeing some of you in 30 minutes time. Thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.